Hello everyone, and welcome to our second part of Australia's domestic macroeconomic goals, talking about full employment for the most part, a little bit of jobs and growth, because that was in 2017, the government's mantra that we're going to update to 2020. So part two, more questions, more answers, probably more sarcasm, because that's how I roll. If you haven't watched part one, the part one of this had all the stuff about low inflation, a little bit of the business cycle, five-sector circular flow model, and a little bit of economic growth. Try to split it up because it's a massive topic and you probably don't want to watch videos that go for about 40 minutes. So this is going to be a little bit better this way. So let's get straight into tips. They're the same as last time. Use the AD equation. It'll tell you how to structure your answers. Other point, it doesn't actually come up in any of the answers that we go through today, but if you're talking about unemployment, name drop the specific type of unemployment in full employment based questions. It makes you look really smart, like you know what you're talking about. So if unemployment's changing, like at the moment, there's a lot of structural unemployment because of all the business closures. Great, say that. Don't just say unemployment's risen. Structural unemployment has risen because of the business closures. You'll look super smart. The examiners will be marking it. They'll be like, whoa, look at this kid. Let's give him full marks, or her. We'll see how that goes. So getting straight into multiple choice questions. Question 4 for 2019, an increase in the labour force participation rate is most likely to what? So in this case, more people are participating in the labour force. There are more people actively looking for work. So we've got the options: A, increase productivity. Well, not necessarily, because it's just more people potentially looking for work, not necessarily more people working. So productivity may stay the same in the short term and might eventually rise. Increased productive capacity, well, technically yes, because well, in the short term there's more capacity available because we've got more labor resources available to then employ and produce more. So that's looking pretty good. So let's put some marks against these. Let's go dark green because it looks good. So that, no. This is looking good. Decrease government revenue. Well, if more people are actively looking for work, it's not really going to affect government revenue in the short term. When they get a job, it's going to increase government revenue because more tax, and it's going to decrease government expenses because paying less welfare. So both of these are incorrect as well, which is going to get us to that first one, increased productive capacity, which is the right answer. Whoa, that was a terrible highlight, but that's what we're going with there. It's kind of a tricky question because it's kind of making you think about something from an angle you don't really think about it from normally. So it takes a little bit more of that. With all these economics questions, it's about ruling out the incorrect answers to find the right answer most of the time, and then hopefully justifying to yourself why that right answer is the right answer. So that's question 4, 2019. Another one for 2019, they get you to do some calculations. So consider the following information for a hypothetical economy. The total population are 100 million, employed persons 70 million, unemployed persons 10 million, and underemployed persons 2 million. So you're already like, oh, there's a lot of data there. I could calculate a whole lot of different things. Based on the data shown above, the unemployment rate of this hypothetical economy would be. So you would care about the unemployment rate. So in your head, you're like, oh, I need to remember what the unemployment rate is, what that calculation is. I'll tell you for one thing straight away. You are just going to cross out this underemployed persons. That's just there to distract you. You do not need that. Those underemployed people are included in employed people. So you don't need that. So what we're going to need to do, we need the unemployed persons over the, so the unemployment rate being, it's going to end up being 10 over the labor force, which is the employed plus unemployed people. So that's going to be 80, which I believe, if I do some math in my head, that's, well, 1/8 is 12.5%. So then we get 12.5% for that. And that should be our right answer. You'll be amazed how many people do 10% for that, because they do 10 over 100, but it's not over the population. The unemployed people is not over the population. It's all about as a percentage of the labor force, and labor force being the unemployed persons plus the employed persons. So don't fall for that trick. So realistically, you can also get rid of that when you are doing this question to start with. So you can cross those out, and then you only care about those two numbers. And that's a really important thing in all multiple choice questions for VCAR stuff. They love to throw in extra information to throw you off. And you're already a little bit stressed and anxious because you're in an exam. You've really got to focus on what data is important and just cross the other stuff out, because otherwise it's going to be there. It's not like accounting where every single piece of information is useful. PS, accounting sucks. But you just got to get the useful things. Don't fall for their distractions. They're trying to trick you. You don't want to fall for their tricks, because whoever wrote the exam is probably giggling to themselves when you fall for it. Question 1 from, I believe, 2017. I think we might have skipped a year because they didn't ask much about unemployment in 2018. But the type of unemployment caused by technological change is known as. So we've got our 4 types of, we've got 4 of the types of unemployment here. We've got cyclical, frictional, structural, and hardcore unemployment. Hopefully this is a pretty easy one. If you know your types of unemployment, you're not going to stuff around here. You're just going to be like structural unemployment, boom, easy, move on, carry on with your day. It's not going to be cyclical because it's not caused by changes in aggregate demand. It's not going to be frictional because it's nothing about someone spending time between losing one job and starting another one. It's not going to be hardcore unemployment because it's not based on those personal factors that make it difficult for them to get a job. Therefore structural because it's based on technological change. Think of those self-serve checkouts replacing workers, or robots replacing workers, or businesses closing down. Well, that's not technological change. I'm just getting into what structural unemployment is. All right, question 13. As the level of aggregate demand slows, so slows being important there, the budget outcome will. I really struggled with all these questions to find ones that don't just mash in other topics when you talk about unemployment. So a lot of what we're going to look at also has budgetary type stuff with it as well. And so the budget outcome will improve as unemployment increases. Let's think about that. If unemployment starts increasing, what's going to happen with the budget? Well, they are going to start outlaying more in terms of welfare. And so that one becomes incorrect because the budget outcome is not going to improve. It's going to get worse. Deteriorate as unemployment increases. Well, so far, based on the opposite of that, that's going to be correct. Let's see if there's a more correct answer. C, improve as social security payments decrease. Well, we've just said that's not going to happen. They're going to be paying more welfare. And deteriorate as, once again, social security payments decrease. No, they're going to be paying more welfare. Therefore, B is correct. B is correct in all of these questions that I've been picking, which makes me think, is the answer B a lot in VCAR? If all else fails, pick B. But I'd prefer you know the correct answer, so don't do that. Know the correct answer first. And that's it for the multiple choice. Relatively simple in these ones. So we're going to get into 2 short answer questions this time, because we already went through a lot of this topic in the previous video. So this one we're just going to go into the 2 kind of bigger questions, but they're not overly difficult. So we'll get into them, smash them out. So first up, both are from 2019. So last year, they're pretty recent, pretty current. Actually, no, one is, one was going to be, but then I got rid of it because it's not relevant this year. So one's then from the jobs and growth era of 2017. So first one we're going to look at from 2019, discuss one likely impact of the Australian government's budgetary policy stance this year, as announced in the 2019-2020 budget, on the achievement of full employment and low inflation or price stability. So you're going to get it's a 6-mark question, so that's pretty big. Describe the budgetary policy stance of this year with data. If possible, data is great. Always include data. If you know data, include it. If you haven't learnt the data yet, start getting on the data from the last 2 years and the important numbers in that. You should know them. Check out the RBA snapshot. That's a very good tool. Print it out, put it on your wall. Just stare at it all the time. Laminate it, put it in the shower. Like, you want to be looking at that a lot so you know those numbers. 2 marks for talking about the impact of full employment. So define the goal, talk about the strength and weakness of achieving it. And 2 marks for the impact on the rate of inflation with the goal and strengths and weaknesses. So when we look at what VCAR said about this, we're going to update the answer to the most recent times, but we'll look at what VCAR did and the overall average for it. So the overall average was 2.9 out of 6. So less than half of the marks were achieved by most students. Only 11% of people got full marks. And as you can see, a lot got in the lower end. So some students did not address the requirements of this question and were unable to score high marks. Some students were required to refer to the 2019-2020 budgetary policy stance, but many just looked at some discretionary measures without reference to the stance. So the stance being expansionary or contractionary, You need to be able to say that, and a lot of people miss out on that. So let's look into a sample answer that I wrote up this morning. So the Australian government's budgetary policy stance this year has been an expansionary deficit, attempting to limit the negative ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Australian economy, with a deficit of more than $184 billion expected. This has been used throughout 2020 to attempt to stimulate the economy and increase the amount of injections into aggregate demand. The goal of full employment is the lowest rate of unemployment possible without creating unnecessary inflationary pressure, measured at approximately 4.5 of people unemployed. As part of the government's deficit, there has been a significant injection into infrastructure projects, as well as wage subsidies through JobKeeper, which aims to create jobs and limit the amount of employed workers being laid off through the pandemic. However, even with these policies, the unemployment rate has risen from 5.1% in February to 7.5% in July of 2020. Which shows that although the policies have helped slow the increase in unemployment, they're unlikely to achieve the goal of full employment anytime soon. One really important thing there is always tying it back into that achievement of the goal. Sometimes people have incredible answers, but they never actually mention about the achievement of the goal, and then you lose marks. So you've got to make sure you do that. As you can see, including data throughout this, very important too, to make it a high quality answer. The goal of low inflation is to have the general level of prices rising at 2 to 3% on average over time. You could also say as measured by CPI if you want it to be even better. This $184 billion deficit is a significant injection into the economy via government spending. Some would be via private consumption through welfare. However, aggregate demand has still fallen dramatically due to falls in private consumption spending and private investment spending, due to falling levels of consumer and business confidence through the pandemic, which the government stimulus packages have not been able to curtail. Although inflation increased to 2.2% in the March quarter due to shortages caused by panic buying, it has now fallen to negative 0.3%, which shows that on average, the goal of low inflation has not been achieved. So as you can see, breaking it down into the sections, stance with some data, 2 marks. Full employment goal with some data, whether it's been achieved, 2 marks. Low inflation goal with some data, whether it's been achieved, 2 marks. It's actually not too difficult overall, but it becomes a fairly big answer if you want to include all those things that make it a high quality answer to set you apart from the other students, which hopefully you still want to do. Then the last one we're going to look at, so we're going to look at from 2017, question 3A. So Treasurer Scott Morrison, how far he has come from this point, stated in 2016-2017 budget speech that the Australian government has a plan for jobs and growth. And not much has changed because he still has to talk about that. So we're going to update it to 2019-2020. So describe the 2019-2020 performance of the Australian economy in terms of jobs and growth. So in 2017, they were smashing this. It was like, I swear, almost like 7 questions where rather than saying employment and economic growth, they said jobs and growth because it was everywhere that year. And so a lot of students struggled with the fact that because it wasn't using the terminology they were used to, they didn't know what to talk about. So you've got to be aware of these kind of things too. If they just use general terminology, you need to tie that in with the theory of what we've learned and talk about that theory. So for 4 marks, 2 marks were describing how unemployment rates have changed across the year with reference to current data and trends, and 2 marks was from describing how economic growth rates have changed across the year with reference to current data and trends. So relatively simple, but a lot of people went off into weird random tangents in different directions. So the average for this one was 2.1, and basically the main issues was that students needed to recognize that this question was asking about the performance of the economy in terms of the ability to create jobs and achieve full employment, and increase economic growth, and achieve the macroeconomic goal of that. So let's get into a sample answer for it that I wrote up earlier. So full employment is the government macroeconomic goal whereby all people who want a job and would be able to obtain one can. This will occur when cyclical unemployment is 0 or the lowest rate that can be achieved without causing inflation, usually around 4.5 to 5% unemployment. That's way too long of a definition for full employment. You can cut that down to about half. In terms of jobs, in 2019-2020, performance would appear negative as there has been a decrease in the number of jobs created, with the unemployment trending upwards from approximately 5.1% to 7.5% in July of 2020. While there have been a number of jobs created in 2019-2020 through government policies and spending, a large number of businesses have permanently closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of rates of economic growth, It'd be reasonable to suggest that the Australian economy has been performing below expectations across 2019-2020. Over this period, real GDP has hovered around 1.8 to 2%, with a significant drop to 6.3%, negative 6.3% GDP growth in the July quarter of 2020. This is below the unofficial target for strong and sustainable economic growth, which is 3 to 3.5% GDP growth per annum. Just with both of them, the goal, the data, where it's been going, how it's performed. It's pretty simple. And that's the sample for this. Hopefully this has been useful. If you have any questions about these, feel free to hit me up, send me an email, ask me any questions that you have. We'll do another one of these for Australia and the world economy, but if you have any questions about that, or if there are any other topics you want to dive into, if there's anything specifically you're not sure on, more than happy to go into theory rather than just doing sample questions. Whatever is good. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.